بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Congratulations for today, or yesterday, was the first day of the month of Sha'ban. So congratulations to all of you. We've finally moved to the month of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And hopefully this month is going to be full of many blessings and happy occasions for you. You know, get our spirits up despite what's going on around the world. And inshallah this month will come with a lot of shifa for everybody who is affected. Inshallah, we pray for everybody in those major countries being affected right now, and inshallah it doesn't spread more than it has already. But you know, let's look at the good side. We don't have to go out anymore. We can do everything with our family nowadays. School, university, it's all online now. So inshallah there is benefits to it, as there are many negatives, but alhamdulillah, every challenge was given to us to pass, inshallah. Alright, so last week we kind of before we start actually, we want to send the thawab of this majlis to Sahib al-Asr wa-Zaman, Ajalla ta'ala Faraj al-Sharif. So we will start by reciting Dua al-Faraj, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل على محمد وآل محمد. So last week we kind of went off on a tangent introducing a new topic called potentiality versus actuality. And the reason we did that was, we said, because we needed this new concept to understand the next two souls of the hadith. So now we're up to the divine intellectual soul, or as we commonly call it, the human soul, as you can see. And inshallah we will be using the concepts that we learnt last week to develop our understanding about the soul, inshallah. So first we'll start with a summary of what we said last week, which will be relevant to this week, inshallah. So we said that the divine and intellectual soul is in potential, and that this dunya that we live in is the womb for this potential. Okay, so it means that we have this certain time and these certain conditions around us which we're meant to use to be able to actualize the soul. Okay? And we also introduced a very interesting concept. We're like, so if we don't have this human soul actualized, does this mean we're not human yet? Are we like animals or not? And we said that's not the case, because we are insan tam, but not kamil. And the reason we are tam is because this potential exists. We have these two souls inside of us in potential, which animals do not have. And because of this, we have the structures required to become tam. So remember the example of the mosque. We said if the structure was complete, but it didn't have full shelves of qara'in, it was tam because the structure is complete and we can start using it, but it's not common or complete because we haven't put everything required in there so that the mosque can serve its purpose. Okay, and the same applies to us. So we are human, tam humans, but we're not kamil. We can only achieve insan kamil by actualizing these two souls. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this incredible thing called the fitra. The fitra is like a moral compass that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and the reason He's given it to us is so that it drives us to actualize our potential. It stems from the potential of these two souls. Okay, so without having this potential, we don't have a fitra. So if we kill the potential, our fitra goes away or is dormant. We can't use it. Alright, this fitra comes from the potential of these two souls, and it drives us to try and actualize them. Okay? So now that we're thinking about it, is there any point of us learning about these souls if, like about the characteristics and the tools of this soul, if we still don't have them yet? The thing is, we do have them. Okay? There's this thing. The question is, can we use the tools and the characteristics of the soul? And we're saying yes, you can. But there are limitations to these tools and characteristics because we haven't actualized it. And we're going to give a really cool example from a recent movie that came out, okay? So I'm sure you guys have all seen The Incredibles and you know Jack Jack. So Jack Jack is this awesome character who has many, many powers. However, he can't control his powers. They kind of just come and go as they like. He has no control over his powers, but he has access to all the powers. And the same applies to us with the human soul and the universal soul. We can access the tools and the characteristics of these souls, but we have no control over them. So sometimes they're used, and sometimes they're not used. And we don't know whether or not we're using them. Okay? And that's the reason, and that can become dangerous, right? Because sometimes we think we're using the soul, but it's actually Shaitan kind of making this illusion, making us feel like we're using it. So that's why it's really important that we need to gain control over these souls by actualizing them before death comes. Because if we die, remember from last week, if we die without actualizing it, and by having really deep roots to this dunya, it becomes very, very difficult for us to transition to al-akhirah. And so we're going to use this baby example again. So if a baby is born without being fully developed, so prematurely, what we doctors do is they put them in an incubator. But for this child, it's not as comfortable as the womb. It's not dark, it doesn't have this warm fluid around it, it doesn't have the mother's heartbeat there, okay? Instead, it's having this bright light on top of it, and it has hands poking at it and tubes being put into its nose and mouth so it can breathe and eat. So it's very uncomfortable, but it's important that this child is put in an incubator so that they can complete their development. And for us, if we do not actualize ourselves before we go to the next life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also puts us in an incubator, and this incubator makes sure we actualize it. It's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be nice. It's going to be quite painful, alright? And sometimes barzakh is not enough as an incubator for some of us. Sometimes it even extends to hellfire. And for the people who have killed their potentiality, they have to go through the incubation process, but because they have no potential left, they're just going to stay in the incubator forever. People like Fir'aun, Muawiyah, Yazid, they will stay in hell forever because they can't actualize their soul. They don't have that potential anymore. Alright? It's scary. But that's why the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa says, Mutu qabla an tamutu. And when he is asked for an example about this, he says, look at Ali. Imam Ali is the definition of the walking dead. Alright? Not zombies, Imam Ali. Because when he was alive, of course, he was at a state where if he died at any moment, he would be ready for death. He knew exactly what actions he's done. He knows exactly how accountable he is for everything. That when he dies, he knows that he's safe. And inshallah, we can reach a state where we can be as confident as that. That when we die, there's nothing to be afraid of, inshallah. Okay? And so the first step to do that is to actualize our human soul. So now we're going to go back to Hadith Nafs. Alright? We've had a long break, inshallah. Now we're going to come back to it. And we're going to look at what Imam Ali alayhi salam says about this divine intellectual human soul. الإمام علي عليه السلام says الناطقة القدسية لها 5 قوى: الفكر والذكر والعلم والحلم والنباهة، وليس لها انبعاث، وهي أشبه الأشياء بالنفوس الفلكية، ولها خاصتان: النزاهة والحكمة. So the English translation to this is that the divine intellectual soul, or the human soul, has 5 tools: pondering, remembering, knowledge, self-control, and enlightened thoughts. It has no origin and is most similar to celestial beings, and it has 2 characteristics: moving away from falsehood and wisdom. So, as we did with the animalistic soul, we're going to look at this chronologically, starting from the origin of the soul, then moving to the characteristics, and then the tools. So with the origin of the human soul, Imam Ali alayhi salam says it has no origin. But why is that? And the reason for that primarily is that it's not associated to our human body. Both the plantic and the animalistic soul required some form of physical requirements to be able to form, whereas the human soul doesn't. So what are the requirements for it? Alright? The thing is, for it to exist, we need to look at it. We're like, so we have these characteristics. These characteristics come from the plantic soul. These characteristics come from the animalistic soul. But we have other characteristics which aren't put into these 2 souls. So they must come from somewhere else. Logically, there has to be another place where these come from. And once we recognize that there is a 3rd element into the human, which we haven't talked about yet, then we recognize that something else exists. Okay? And that's where the human soul comes from. It's this, what we call intellectual acknowledgement of its existence. And the reason why the Imam says it has no origin is because there's no time limit to when we will have this realization. Okay? Some people may have it as soon as they're born, and some people may never have it in their entire life. Alright? It just depends on who you are. But the thing is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this epiphany. Alright? You can't recognize that you require something else without actually being motivated to seek that thing. Okay? And this motivation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to us, and it's called al-yaqla, the awakening. Only when we become awakened can we recognize that we have powers which animals don't have, which plants don't have. I mean, scientists today don't believe this. We know that because they think we come from monkeys through evolution. So they don't believe we have these powers beyond. But once you recognize that you have these powers beyond, you recognize that there is something inside of us which is the origin of that. And that comes from us thinking through this process. And this thinking process can't come without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually sparking this idea inside of us. And that's the yaqla. Okay? But for us to be able to come up with that, we require the ability to think alone. And when does a human start to think alone? As soon as they're born. When you're inside the stomach, you can't think for yourself. Inside your mother's stomach, okay? But as soon as you're born, you have this ability. So the onset of the soul is at birth, but its origin comes when you decide it to come, okay? Only your intellectual acknowledgement will bring upon the soul. And once you acknowledge it, you recognize you have this responsibility to actualize it, right? Because you recognize that you can tap into more powers than you already have. Okay, and that's the reason why there are so many people now who seek spiritual awakening through different means, like Buddhist monks and that kind of thing, because they recognize it exists, but they just don't know how to get there. They don't believe in the Quran or the Ahlul Bayt to give them that direct message, which is unfortunate. But at least they've recognized it's there. But they haven't had that full awakening, which gives them the realization of where to get this information from. Alright? So now we're going to move on to the characteristics of the soul. Now that we've recognized that it exists, and that it is potential, but we can access its powers. And so its powers, when we say powers, we mean its tools and characteristics. Now we have to look at the tools and characteristics to see what they are. And the two characteristics of this soul, the one was avoiding falsehood and veering towards the truth, and the second is wisdom. And these are pretty heavy characteristics, so we're going to take them individually. Usually we take them together, but this time we're going to take them individually. So we're going to start with avoiding falsehood. So at the beginning, we said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this fitrah so that we can move towards actualizing our potential. And we define the fitrah as this moral compass which always tells us to do good. Okay? And it's because it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fitrah, the definition of good for the fitrah is the definition of good for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means it's the true good. Okay? However, we also have a mind. And so sometimes what we think is good changes. Alright? So the true good obviously comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's given that to us through the Quran and through hadith from our ma'sumin, from our prophets. So those are the general places that we get our hadiths from. And this is where the true goodness comes from. However, there are other things in our lives which also dictate what we think good and not good is. Right? One thing is the legal system, the law. So you may be like, oh, that's not, true goodness, but there is some goodness to the law. Okay, so because humans make the law and humans have this fitrah, alright, so we do make some decisions based on this fitrah, even if we're not Muslim. Okay, so an example of where the law is good and it is a representation or a manifestation of the good, of the true good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, for example, in the Quran and Hadith, we are encouraged a lot not to, do something bad or hurt other people. We try to be as nice to other people as possible, and we try not to harm anyone. And but there's nowhere in the Quran which says that you have to be 16 years old to start driving, right? It says that we can't harm people unless, there's a good reason to, whether it's to save their life or that kind of thing. But it doesn't say that you have to be 16 to drive. But Australian law says you have to be 16 before you can drive. And the reason that this limitation on the age has been put is to make sure that the people in our community are safe. So that is a good law. It is a representation of good because it is a manifestation of the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, humans are flawed. Not everything that we think is good is good. And so some of the laws that have come to pass aren't very just. So interest, for example, same-sex marriage, that kind of thing, they go against our fitrah. Alright? And the law predominantly comes from what? From society, from people. And people can be flawed. Like, for example, we have this good fashion, bad fashion. That's defined by society, right? So you can't wear sneakers with jeans or else that's, considered bad. That's not in the Quran, right? However, there's so many things about fashion where people think it's good, which doesn't comply to hijab, for example. So that doesn't go along with the fitrah's definition of good, but society thinks that's good. And this makes it very difficult for us because we don't know whether this comes from the fitrah or comes from the mind, remember, because we haven't actualized our human soul yet. So we come to decisions, and we don't know whether these are good decisions or bad decisions, and we come to this dilemma. And if we have this dilemma, how can we avoid doing something which is bad? something which is not the truth. Alright, and a good example of that that's happening at the moment, inshallah none of the Muslims are going through this path, but something that's changing in our society is euthanasia. So if you guys don't know what euthanasia is, it's if a patient is really, really sick and doctor's like, there's a likely chance that, you know, you're not going to get better or anything and this patient is suffering, they can ask the doctor to end their life, give them a drug which will pretty much stop their heart. Now, there are two wrong reasons for this, okay? So the reason they think this is okay, and they're like, it's my life, I get to choose what I do with it. And there's two major problems with euthanasia. The first one is they actually believe that their life is theirs. And we know all ownership is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we don't even own this life. So that's the first problem. That's a problem of faith. But other than the problem of faith, linking it back to last week's lecture, they're not only killing their own potential, they're asking someone else to do it for them. They're asking the doctors to kill their potential. So it's not like the sin is going to be just on them. They're asking someone else to be part of that. That's not okay. That's causing way more harm than it is. It's not causing any good. It's causing harm more than just to the person, but to many others as well. And so we come to these dilemmas in many things in our life, and these are just a few examples of the things that we see today which we struggle with internally, whether it be politics, whether it be financially, whether it be with raising children. There are many, many issues that we face, and we just don't know what's good and what's not anymore. And so a solution to that is very, very simple, and it's listening to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Imams have told us. And it is, go back to someone who has more knowledge than you. Because these people, our ulama, they are closer to actualizing their human soul, or may even have actualized their human souls compared to us. Which means that they have a better understanding and better grasp of their fitrah, and they can make better decisions about what is good and what is not than we can. Alright, we need to understand that we're not perfect and we can't do everything and that we need help. And if we want to start to actualize, we should start to move towards actions which will help us to control these tools and characteristics. Okay, so when it comes to avoiding falsehood, our first step, what we can do is listen to our ulama fully. Alright? Not to go and like, if, for example, if a alim has put a condition and was like, if you're not satisfied, go look at another alim. And because you just don't want to do that thing, you go and search every single book there is to try and find an excuse out of it. Just listen. It's good to listen. Okay? The second characteristic was wisdom. And we'll define wisdom as good judgment. But where does wisdom come from? A lot of people define wisdom as a combination of both knowledge and experience. When someone has these two things, they're said to have wisdom. However, is this really true? Let's look at what the Quran says about wisdom. So in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يؤتي الحكمة من يشاء ومن يؤتى الحكمة فقد أوتي خيرا كثير وما يتذكر إلا أولي الألباب. He brings wisdom to whom he wishes, and who is brought wisdom, then they have been given much goodness, and who remembers except those who understand. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows wisdom to us. Alright, all wisdom comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He gives it to us. So even someone who's ignorant or a tyrant could have wisdom, because they're just the mouthpiece to the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not actually theirs. And so we can get wisdom from anybody. It doesn't have to be a reliable source. This is very different to knowledge, okay? Wisdom is different from knowledge. So wisdom can be taken from any source. You don't need to look for the best source of wisdom. And the reason for that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows it on who believes are worthy of it. And inshallah, that's us. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us those cruxes and bits of wisdom. But what does it mean to have wisdom as a characteristic of the soul? Is that once we actualize the soul, we become this ready vessel, ready mouth for the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We become able to give it away. So it's a really important thing to be able to actualize the soul, because these two are really important for us to be able to make decisions in our life. But how do we reach this stage of being able to actualize it? And there are 4 steps to the actualization of the soul. And inshallah, we will dedicate the next 5 lectures to discussing each of these steps in greater detail. So the first step is loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second is loving our Ahlul Bayt. The third is dhikr. And the last one is to hang out with the right people. So, as you can see, they're quite big things and things that we need to work on in our daily life to be able to do. But inshallah, if we are able to completely get on top of these 4 aspects, we will be able to actualize our human souls. And we will look into more detail about each of these and how we can apply each of these into our daily lives, inshallah. So now we're going to move to the tools of the soul. And these 5 tools were pondering, remembering, knowledge, self-control, and enlightened thinking, or enlightened thoughts. And we're going to look at each of these separately. So the first one is pondering. What is pondering, and why do we need it in our daily life? There's this beautiful hadith from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Rasul says, تفكر ساعة خير من عبادة 70 سنة. So 1 hour of pondering is better than 70 years of worship. It means that pondering must be something extremely important and extremely valuable, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us this much thawab and this much importance to it. 70 years of worship. That may be one person's entire life. So imagine if we did 1 hour of pondering every day. We're pretty much getting a lifetime worth of worship, of thawab, every single day. So it must be important. But what is it? So pondering is this cycle, alright? It's a cycle. It starts from wondering. So you see something and you start wondering about it. Like, wow, it's so beautiful. How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this? You start thinking about it more deeply, looking into its roots. How did it come about? Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it? Then contemplation, its existence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system. You continue to do that. Make it a cycle. Okay? And there are 2 forms of pondering as well. So this is how you ponder. It's by wondering, then thinking, then contemplating, and going back into wonder. But there's 2 ways that you can do this. And the first one is pondering the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these can be from the biggest of all creations to the smallest of creations. It can be the living creations, and it can be the non-living creations. So go out. I mean, obviously not now, not with the corona going around, but once things settle, just go out on a walk, look at the sky, look at things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, and start contemplating their existence, wondering what their role is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system, and thinking about what they do. And even now, we're trapped at home. There's so many things at home that we can contemplate. But what we can also do is research about them. Like, Google's such a good source. If you have a question, Google it. Try and find out what it's about. Try to link it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alright? Science classes are incredible for this type of pondering. You're learning about animals, plants, stars. It's a really good way for us to start pondering, like while you're doing your maths or science homework. But I mean, you can also ponder about history, right? Geography. There's many things that you can ponder about. So use your opportunity. You may hate school, but now you can make your homework and your schoolwork really valuable. Worth 70 years of worship. I think that's a good start. The second form of pondering is to ponder the reality of actions and existence. So simple actions like a father nursing his child, or giving money to the poor, or teaching somebody. What are the consequences of these actions? And what is leading us to do these actions? So when we're contemplating if we're using this kind of pondering, what we're actually looking at is what is causing this and what is the effect of this. So you're doing a single act. What is the effect of the act that you're doing? What caused this act? Was it a thought? Where did this thought come from? Was it from a separate experience? If we go back far enough, this is called the chain of cause and effect. If we keep going back to the original cause, we find there's only one cause to everything. That cause is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we recognize that every action that we do in goodness, with a good intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's action. And He's using us to be able to do it. So every good that comes from us is actually from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But every bad is from us. You may be wondering, how is this possible? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the origin of everything, how is it that bad is only from us? Why can't it come from Allah? Astaghfirullah. I'll give you a very good example which can answer this question, okay? So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us teeth. He's given us teeth so that we can eat food, correct? We can munch it up. It's part of the plant soul, remember? But He's also given us delicious food, like chocolate, so that we can enjoy it, that we like this food, right? And the reason why we need to like food is that we would continue to eat, so that we can survive, right? But then, we make a decision. We make a decision that we're going to eat 2 blocks of chocolate every day. And we end up rotting our teeth. Now, rotten teeth, that's a bad thing. However, what caused that bad thing? Our bad decision to eat 2 blocks of chocolate a day. The causes of that, the teeth and the chocolate, they're both good. They're not bad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us these 2 good things. However, our decision, which comes from our free will, to put these 2 together in an incorrect manner, created something bad. Okay? And that is why that only humans can create bad stuff. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot create anything bad. So that is pondering. Looking at just the existence around us and how it fits in Allah's system, and then looking at our actions and how we fit in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system as well. Now we come to the second, which is remembering. So in the dictionary, this may not be visible on the screen, I'm really sorry, but remembering is defined as the ability to bring to one's mind an awareness of something from the past. And this here, the science behind the memory says that it's a synchronized firing of neurons that were involved in an original experience. So I'll explain this slightly. So you do something, okay, and how you do it, your brain tells your muscles to move. How your brain tells things to move is it fires these electronic signals in your body, and they tell you to move. When you're remembering that action, psychology tells us that the brain is firing those same pathways again, those same actions, but you don't do the action this time, it's just firing in your head. And so what it's saying is memory is linked to the brain, this human body. It's interesting. The second thing is that there are other creatures that also have a memory. For example, elephants, one of the creatures in the world that have really, really, really long memories. Okay? They can remember from 40 years ago where they drank water. It's incredible. But they can only remember things in their past. So for example, if their father went to drink water in a watering hole, the baby's not going to remember that if they weren't there. So there are limitations to this memory. 2. The one is it's linked to the brain, meaning the physical body. And the second is it's limited to your past. You need to exist in a body to be able to have had the experience so that you can recall it. So now let's look at the Quran, because this kind of contradicts the fact that we're linking it to the human soul, and the human soul is not linked to the body. So we'll look at the Quran, and we've picked 3 ayat which will explain more deeply whether or not we need a body or not, or to exist, to have a memory. The first ayah is about the Day of Judgment. وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ وَإِنَّا لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. So, and a day and what that day is hell. That day when man will remember, and what good will remembrance do for him. Do we have a body in the hereafter? Well, yes, but this body is coming as a shahid. It's going to speak against you. So can we even use our body? Can we use our brain to remember? Don't think so. Because your body is now going to become something which speaks out, tells the truth about what you have done. It's not something that you can use anymore. You can't move the hand anymore. The hand is going to speak against you. So we can't use the brain, because that's part of the body, to create memory. So how are we going to remember in the Day of Judgment? The second ayah we're going to bring is before creation, or before creation of insan. الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش ما لكم من دونه إلا من ولي ولا شفيع أفلا تتذكرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to remember all of this. What is He telling us to remember? He's telling us to remember that Allah is the one who created the heavens and the earth and everything in between in 6 days. And He put Himself on His throne. And He's our protector, our wali, and He's our shafi', our intercessor. That's a lot of things to remember. But when were we told this stuff to remember? Okay, that's another point. Now the last ayah that we're going to bring. هو الذي أنزل عليكم كتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله. I'm very sorry, I'm butchering this ayah. So I'm not going to continue with it. I'll just read the translation. He is the one who sent upon you the book from which are secured signs, which are the foundation of the book. As for those with deviations in their heart, they will follow that which appears similar, seeking discord and interpretations. And no one knows its interpretation but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those who are high in knowledge will say, "We believe in all that is from our Lord, and who will remember but those that understand?" So in this case, people are saying, and who are these people? High in knowledge. The people high in knowledge, they will say that we believe in all that is from our Lord, and who will remember but those that understand? So from these three ayahs, we can come to a conclusion. And this conclusion is that we do not need our body to remember. Remembering is not reliant on the brain. Our brain may be a first access code to this ability. Remember, it's a way for us to access the tool of the soul, but it is not required for this tool. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that it is not limited to our existence in this dunya. Being able to remember means being able to remember the past. And we're not talking about a past in time, although that it is included. It means the past of any form of existence. And the reason why we've come to this conclusion is that we all originated from somewhere. We all existed before we were me and you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is knowing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew what He was creating all along. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited by time. So it means our existence existed in Him this entire time. All time. No time. But we only became humans, or in this dunya humans, for this certain period. However, because we existed in this alam al-ilahi, al-ilm al-ilahi, it means that we could remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating the earth and the sky. We can remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a book with signs. We can remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our wali, our shafi', and the only one we can depend on. And by remembering everything which is in existential past, means that we can recognize our purpose without being told our purpose. And we recognize the pledge that we gave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without needing to be told that we actually made a pledge. A lot of people have this issue, like, we didn't choose to be in this test. We didn't choose to be humans. Why couldn't I be a dog? Thing is, we did. We just don't remember it. Because we haven't fully accessed this tool of remembering. However, when we do access it, or we will know these things are facts. We will know that we did give a pledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We recognize what our purpose is. We recognize how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything. It's actually a very exciting thing to know that we can be able to achieve one day, inshallah, if we achieve it. And this is linked really, really closely to the next tool, which is knowledge. Alright, so first of all, before we make all these links, we're like, what is knowledge? Is it facts or information or the way that we perceive the world? You know how people have your truth, my truth nowadays? Is that true? Well, let's just go back to what we said. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing. He has all the knowledge. And we came from that knowledge. Not only did we come from that knowledge, we have full access to it. Because do you remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to us? Remember this hadith by Imam al-Sadiq, which was given to us by Imam Ali alayhi salam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instilled in us intellect. Same intellect He instilled to angels. Although with angels, it's this limited intellect, limited to their own purposes. So like, for example, Mika'il would only have the intellect of, rain or that kind of thing. Israfil only when Day of Judgment is, and how things will be conducted on the Day of Judgment. For us, we have all knowledge. How do we know that? Imam Ali has this poem Alright? And he says, أتزعم إنك جرم صغير وفيك انطوى العالم الأكبر? Do you think you are a small creature when folded inside of you is the grand world? Well, obviously, the universe can't fit inside of us. But what can? The knowledge of the universe. Because our souls aren't limited by space or time. There isn't like a maximum capacity for them. There is at the moment because we don't have full access to it. But the more we access, the bigger our capability of putting stuff inside it grows. Okay? Until we actualize our potential and becomes unlimited. An unlimited container which can hold all knowledge. That's how we become knowledgeable. Why is there a limitation? Why has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put limitations to our knowledge at the moment? Why can't we just access all knowledge now? It'd be so useful. We can solve global warming. We can solve so many issues in the world. Poverty. There is a reason though. Have you heard the statement, knowledge is power? It's because it's very, very true. People who have knowledge and can practice this knowledge have very big power. And if you have power which is not controlled by your human soul, but by your animalistic soul, and hence by shaitan, if he gets in, you get tyranny. We see that. Slavery, nuclear weapons, child labor, and even the Beaufort Agreement. It all comes from having knowledge which is being misused. Because these people, they're not using it, or this knowledge is not controlled by their human soul, but it's controlled by the shaitan through their animalistic soul. They have this desire for grand world domination or, different things that they seek instead of the right intentions. And that leads to tyranny and the killing of the potential of the human soul. And a really good example of this is Nobel. So if you guys don't know, Nobel was the one who invented dynamite. And he was so sad that dynamite was used for bad that he created the Nobel Prize to kind of equalize what he had done. Alright, and you're kind of thinking, well, the killing of many, many people can't be justified by a money reward that gets put out there every year, right? He thought it was enough. But this is a form of misused knowledge. He had incredible knowledge of chemistry, but he didn't use it in the right way. Or people took that knowledge from him and they didn't use it in the right way. And it's led to the killing of many, many people. And so, before we can access full knowledge, we need this thing called self-control. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, has this hadith and said, "Ma أضيف شيء إلى شيء أفضل من الحلم والعلم." No two things have been combined better than knowledge and self-control. So hilm is sometimes translated to patience in English, but it's not really patience because we have another word for patience and it's sabr. So the difference between sabr and hilm, so patience and self-control, is that patience is the overarching kind of word. It's about us having control over things that we want to do and waiting on them, not doing them instantly, not completely rushing into the moment. Whereas self-control is having control over your anger and your desires, pretty much your animalistic soul, and not jumping into doing the things your animalistic soul wants, okay? And when combining both knowledge and self-control, what you get is that you form this vessel which is able to receive wisdom. Remember how he said the tools help to lead to the characteristics or create the characteristics? this is a perfect example of how this happens. So the two characteristics of knowledge and self-control give us the ability to create the vessel for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow wisdom upon us. And when we become that vessel, we are no longer just people who provide wisdom, we become wise. Like Luqman al-Hakim. He has actualized his human soul and hence has this perfect balance of knowledge and self-control, and he became the perfect vessel for the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why we know him as Luqman al-Hakim. And now we go to the last tool, which is enlightened thought. But there's no point of going to enlightened thought without knowing what thinking is. And thinking is this, us combining things like central information and facts and opinions together to form this conclusion. A conclusion which we believe to be either false and rejecting it, or true, and hence believing in it. So belief comes from this process called thinking. But there are many types of thinking, okay? These are just a few of the types of thinking there are. Creative, analytical, critical, concrete, abstract, divergent, convergent, linear, and holistic. These are different forms of thinking. But they all have one thing in common. And that common factor is that they are rational, okay? And rationality comes from a process called logic. The same process we use to get to the origin of the soul, or to believe in the soul. Alright? However, let's talk about us, because we're trying to talk about how we can get this, or how we access this tool, correct? And we all grew up in Western society, going into Western schools. And as there are many types of thinking, there are also many types of logic. But in Western society, they favor this one type of logic, and it's the type of logic that they teach us at schools. This kind of logic is called Aristotelian logic. And we're going to go briefly through Aristotelian logic and how it works, so that you understand what bits in your life are you using this in. So you recognize what kinds of thinking that you're using for different things, and whether or not this is the correct type of thinking to use in a particular situation. So Aristotelian logic is based on the fact that you have these two things called premises, and when you put these two premises together, it gives you a conclusion. So these premises can be, as we said before, central information, facts, opinions, whatever. And when you put them together, they lead to a conclusion. So an example of this could be, for example, fruits have seeds. Apples are fruits. These are your two premises. So your conclusion becomes apples have seeds. So fruits have seeds and apples are fruits. Because apples are fruits, they must also have seeds. That's how this form of logic works. And so if our train of thought follows this process, it's called a valid process, valid logic, because it follows this method, alright? But sometimes this method can lead to wrong conclusions. An example of that could be cats hate water, tigers are cats, so it means tigers hate water. That's not true, because tigers love water. And the reason why this is incorrect is because it's not sound. Alright, so sound means that it is valid, so it follows the process, and that both of the premises are correct. So now, tiger example, the problem was that we said cats hate water. We should have said most cats hate water, and by that what we're doing is we're saying not all of them do. That's true, because cats like tigers and leopards love water. So it excludes them. If we said most cats hate water and tigers are cats, therefore most tigers hate cats, that's also wrong. Okay, so what we need to do is completely change our two premises to be able to get a valid conclusion. And so how do we check whether a premise is correct or not? We need to use evidence. evidence means using our senses. And our senses are the tools of our animalistic soul. So the problem with this, this form of logic is used in three forms of thinking: critical thinking, concrete thinking, and analytical thinking. So now we've reached a problem though, because we're saying that this type of logic, Aristotelian logic, requires information which comes from our senses, which come from our animalistic soul. And we know that shaitan can get into our animalistic soul, very, very easily. Which means that critical thinking, concrete thinking, and analytical thinking can only be used things of the material world. They cannot be used for any form of thinking which is not thinking about the materialistic world. So for example, if you use critical thinking to try and prove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, you cannot do that, because we cannot sense Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our senses. And that's why you have many people who are atheists, because they use only critical, concrete, or analytical thinking to come to the conclusion that Allah doesn't exist. So for us, we need to use other forms of thinking for processes which aren't linked to this world, which are many for us in Islam. And the best form of thinking to do that is holistic thinking. So holistic thinking is when you look at the bigger picture. And there's nobody who can see the bigger picture bigger than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So astaghfirullah, imagine that in every moment of your life you think, what would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? And you're not saying that because you're imagining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing this action, but you recognize that all good comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that you're the vessel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's good. So when you're thinking this way, you're saying that, what would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want me as the vessel of good for him to do? And this is how the Imams and the Prophets think. And that's why they are ma'soomeen, because they always think holistically, and so everything that they've done is good. They've never done anything bad. And so by achieving holistic thinking, we come to enlightened thoughts. So these are the 5 tools of the human soul. And we have been able to grab glimpses and use some of these tools, but not fully. So now to come to our conclusion, we're looking at what this human soul does. If we actualize it, what does it do to us? What will it be able to give us? It gives us this ability to have a full perspective of the universe, not a limited one through our senses, because we now have this ability to achieve enlightened thought through holistic thinking. It also gives us the ability to transcend the boundaries of space and time. If we remember things in the past, we no longer have to exist. It's not revolved around our existence in this world. It revolves around the existence of everything. So we can look, it means that if you actualize the soul, you can look into the past or the future, which is really cool. It also has because we have this ability now to see in the future, it allows us to foresee everything. And what we mean by see in the future, it doesn't mean the future, because obviously there are many things in the future that we can't control, because it depends on the free will of every individual in this world. But it means the ability to see all futures. And the reason that we'll be able to see all futures, because everything in this world follows the system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we access the knowledge from the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we'll be able to understand these systems of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we can follow everything in this universe's system and what they can do, and then we can come up with X amount of futures, and we can see these pathways, these different futures. And that's what we mean by foreseeing what will happen. It's by being able to be like, okay, so plants they start off as seeds, then they grow this. Now we can recognize the future of a plant. But then there's so many other factors, say. So if we account for all these factors, then we'll be able to see what different situations this plant can go through to lead to these many conclusions. So this plant can grow to not have any fruit because it doesn't get pollinized. This plant can have fruit, but they're going to be small because it doesn't get much sunlight. That's what we mean by foreseeing the future, or seeing into the future, okay? Not, those like mind readers or people who tell fortunes or that kind of thing. Not that nonsense. And by being able to actualize our human soul, it gives us this really amazing ability. This is its most important purpose. It gives us closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it allows us to actualize more of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hakim, Al-Alim. That's just to name a few, but it gives us many more of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So that's the end of the lecture. I'm really sorry this one was pretty long and pretty content heavy, but inshallah that you guys understood it. And the good thing about it being online, you can always go back and re-listen to it again if you need to. We'll now move on to the movie segment. So today we've also picked a clip from Kung Fu Panda, but not the first one, the second Kung Fu Panda movie. And it's because Kung Fu Panda has a lot of really, really good messages. But this particular clip comes from the part of the movie where he has just lost all his friends to an evil person called Shen, who is a white peacock. And he's kind of lost hope. He doesn't know what's going on around him. But then this sheep picks him up and she takes him to a particular place. And that particular place was his village, his old home that he knows nothing about because he was a child, a baby, when he was taken away from it. So we're going to look at this particular clip and how he now recognizes what he has to do by achieving something. So put the volume up.
Oh. Yeah, like you could make me drink that.
If I wanted you dead, I would have left you in that river.
Why save me?
So you can fulfill your destiny.
What are you talking about? Where am I? What is this place?
I'm surprised you remember so little, but you were so little when it happened. Perhaps you do remember.
What? It's just a stupid nightmare.
Nightmare or memory? This was a thriving village. Young Shen was in line to rule Gongmen City, but he wanted more. I foretold that someone would stand in his way, a panda. But I never could have foretold what came next. Stop fighting. Let it flow. Your story may not have such a happy beginning, but that doesn't make you who you are. It is the rest of your story, who you choose to be. So, who are you, Panda?
I am Poe. And I'm gonna need a hat.
صلى على محمد وآل محمد. Yeah, these movies are great. So if you haven't seen all 3 Kung Fu Panda movies, I recommend that after you finish all the RSR lectures, you should watch them all one after the other so you can see the progress of Poe. So, I mean, just kind of putting context into it. So Poe has the potential to become the Dragon Warrior. In the first movie, he gets the title, and he only becomes officially a Dragon Warrior in the 3rd movie. So this is from the 2nd movie, so he's still not the Dragon Warrior. But if you see that last bit when she was telling him, oh, you know, it's who you choose to be, that will, determine the future kind of thing. What he remembered was being told he was the dragon warrior and actually getting that title. So it's kind of like when we get that yakba and we recognize that we have a human soul, that's when we can start working towards actualizing our human soul. So that's number one. The second thing is he had these memories, right? He gets these glimpses of what happened to him in the past, but he wasn't in control to be able to view the entire memory. Only when he gained inner peace or self-control was he able to access the entire memory. And if you see the memory sequence again, he wasn't looking at the sequence through his own view. Like, it wasn't a first-person perspective of the memory. It was a third-person perspective. He was looking at it holistically. So once he achieved, you can see it because sometimes you can see him in the clip, right? He was walking over, he's in the basket of radishes. So he was getting the memory of the past, not his past. Which is, another incredible thing that they've just kind of inserted in this clip as well. We have to also remind you again that, it may not have been the intention of the creators to put so many messages in these movies, but wisdom comes through any means. We shouldn't look at the person saying it, we should look at what they are saying. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a lot of wisdom into these movies. And that's why we recommend you guys go and watch all 3 Kung Fu Panda movies straight, one after the other, so that you can actually look at the progress and the actualization of Po as the Dragon Warrior and the journey that he had to go through to be able to do it, because it's really similar to the journey that we have to do and we have to undertake to be able to actualize our own human soul. So the things that we want you guys to get from this clip is the whole, what was stopping Po from being able to remember the full memory, and it's the fact that because he hadn't actualized this state of being in, they call it inner peace, the state of inner peace, but for us it's this state of controlling our human soul. He didn't have this self-control, but when he achieved this inner peace or this self-control, he was able to access this full memory that he had. But I mean, accessing the full memory is very different from actualizing the full soul. So, but what it is enabled him to do is to recognize that he has this potential and that it exists, and he needs to move towards actualizing this potential. So those are the 3 key concepts that we want you guys to get from this clip. Inshallah, this helps out in answering the quiz. We'll end it here, and Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.